first thing that broke was not my heart, though that would come. It was the sound. The crisp, final thud of dirt hitting my son's casket, a sound so brutally physical it vaporized the last of my denial. Dennis was gone. The brilliant, stubborn, beautiful boy I'd taught to build model airplanes was sealed in a box, 6 feet under a cold March sky. I stood there frozen, the funeral program crumpling in my white-knuckled grip. The wind, sharp and unfeeling, whipped through the cemetery, scattering petals from the white lilies like forgotten promises. And then I heard her voice. Vera, my daughter-in-law. Her words, low and clear, cut through the muffled sobs of the other mourners and struck me with the force of a physical blow. Finally, I can rest. Dennis was so difficult to care for these last months. The air left my lungs. I turned, my movements slow, creaking with a grief I could barely contain. Vera stood a few feet away, not looking at the grave, but at her phone, her thumb scrolling through messages. A faint, satisfied smile played on her perfectly painted lips. She looked like a woman who had just closed a tedious business deal, not buried her husband. Vera, my voice was a rasp, shredded by tears I'd fought to hold back during the eulogy. We just buried my son, show some respect for the dead. She glanced up, her eyes, a cool, calculating blue, flicking over me with undisguised irritation. Your son, her laugh was a short, sharp dagger. He was my husband, Alistair, and now everything he was, everything he built is mine. The blatancy of it, the sheer, unvarnished greed, rooted me to the spot. My engineering mind, trained for precision and logic, short-circuited. This woman had stood beside him for 7 years. She had vowed to love him in sickness and in health. And here she was, not 30 minutes after we'd lowered him into the earth, talking about ownership. What is wrong with you? The whisper was torn from me. At least pretend you're sad. A few of the remaining mourners, Tom, Dennis's business partner, and Martha Ellis, a dear family friend, had stopped their retreat to their cars. They were watching now, their faces masks of shock and dawning horror. Vera slipped her phone into her designer purse, the gesture final. Sad, Alistair, I've been planning my new life for months. Dennis knew this marriage was over. We both did. That's a lie, the words were strangled. He loved you, even when the cancer. The cancer was convenient. She adjusted the collar of her expensive black coat, a gift from Dennis, I realized with a fresh wave of nausea. It gave me time to think, to plan. Now I can finally live again. Martha moved to my side, her face pale. Vera, please, this isn't the time or the place. Actually, Martha, Vera said, her heels clicking decisively on the concrete path as she turned to leave, this is exactly the time. I've spent 18 months playing the devoted wife. I'm done performing. I watched her walk away, her stride confident, purposeful. She hadn't shed a single tear, not during the service, not at the graveside. While I had poured my soul out in a eulogy, my voice cracking over memories of my brilliant boy, she had sat in the front pew, checking her watch. Alistair, Martha's hand was on my shoulder, a gentle, grounding pressure. Are you all right? I couldn't answer. My throat was raw, scraped clean by a disbelief so profound it felt like its own kind of death. The woman Dennis had trusted with his life, his heart, his future, had been counting the days until his death. She had been planning her escape while he fought for every ragged breath. The wind moaned through the bare branches of the oak trees overhead. Vera reached her silver Mercedes, another anniversary surprise from Dennis, and slid inside. She didn't look back, not a single fleeting glance at the fresh earth that held the man she'd vowed to love. Standing there, utterly alone beside the gaping wound in the earth, I felt something shatter inside my chest. It wasn't grief, not anymore. It was colder, sharper. It was the first, faint spark of a terrible, clarifying rage. The drive to the house in Evanston was a silent, suffocating journey. Vera drove, the radio off, her manicured fingers tapping a relentless rhythm on the steering wheel. I stared out the window, watching the familiar landmarks of my son's life blur past. The park where I'd taught him to ride a bike. The library where he devoured books on aerodynamics. The university where his dreams had first taken flight. When we turned into the circular driveway of the sprawling, modern home Dennis had built, my headlights illuminated a sight that stopped my heart. 3 suitcases, my suitcases, sat on the pristine front steps like discarded trash. What are those?" I asked, though a cold dread was already coiling in my stomach. Vera parked with surgical precision and killed the engine. "Your belongings, this house is mine now." I stared, uncomprehending. "Vera, this is illegal. I'm officially registered here. This is my residence." She stepped out, her heels crunching on the gravel, and strode to the front door. "Read the rental agreement, Alastair. Dennis rented you a room. The lease ended with his death." "Rental agreement?" I followed her, my legs feeling like water. "What rental agreement?" She didn't bother unlocking the door. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder, extracting a few sheets of paper. Under the harsh porch light, they looked terrifyingly official. "Room rental agreement," she read aloud, her voice crisp and satisfied. "Month-to-month tenancy between landlord Dennis Croft and tenant Alastair Croft. Automatic termination upon death of landlord." My hands trembled as I took the documents. Dennis's signature was there. The dates were correct. The language was cold, precise, and utterly binding. "We just buried your husband," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. "And now my new life begins." She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, a human barrier between me and the home where I had cared for my dying son. "Without you." Dennis would never have wanted this. He loved me. He wanted me taken care of. "Dennis is dead." The finality in her voice was absolute. "I'm alive, and this property belongs to me. The deed is in my name as the surviving spouse." My eyes drifted past her, into the warm, lighted hallway. Through the kitchen window, I could see the detached workshop Dennis had built for me, a retirement dream filled with $10,000 worth of tools I'd barely had time to use. "My workshop," the question was a plea. "Your workshop is on my property. You can arrange to have it moved once you find somewhere to live." The casual cruelty was breathtaking. "Where am I supposed to go? It's nearly 7 o'clock on the day of my son's funeral." "That," she said, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper, "is not my problem." She finally moved. Grabbing the door handle, "Your belongings are packed. Your rental period has expired. If you're not gone in 15 minutes, I will call the police for trespassing." I stood there for a long moment, staring at this stranger who had eaten at my table, who had accepted my care, who had smiled and nodded while secretly drafting my eviction notice. The spark of rage in my chest ignited into a fire. Wordlessly, I turned and walked to my agging sedan. I loaded the 3 suitcases into the trunk and back seat. They contained everything that remained of my life: clothes, a few books, photographs of Dennis, and a small, cherished box of the model airplanes we had built together. Vera watched from the doorway, a silent, triumphant sentinel. She didn't offer help. She didn't speak. She simply waited for me to finish and disappear. As I slammed the trunk closed, she called out, her voice cutting through the chilly evening air. "Don't come back without an appointment, Alastair. This is private property now." The solid oak door clicked shut. A moment later, I heard the distinct sound of deadbolts sliding into place. Then, one by one, the lights in the house began to wink out, as if she were systematically erasing me from every room. I sat in my car, the engine running, the heater blowing stale, warm air against my face. Through the window, I could see the dark silhouette of my workshop, the tools inside waiting for projects that would never be. 18 months of my life, cooking meals Dennis could keep down, managing his medications, holding his hand through the pain, had led to this: homelessness on the day of his funeral. But as I put the car in drive and pulled away, the image of Vera's smug face was seared into my mind. She had made one critical miscalculation. She had shown her hand too early. Dennis, my brilliant, meticulous boy, had been planning something too. In his final weeks, he'd had hushed, urgent meetings with his lawyer, Leonard Vance. He told me, with a strange light in his fever-bright eyes, "I've taken care of your future, Dad. Trust Leonard. He'll explain everything after I'm gone." I'd thought he was talking about a small bequest, a sentimental token. Now, driving into the anonymous darkness, I began to suspect my son had been engineering his final and most important project. The flickering neon, vacancy sign of the Midwest Inn was a siren call in the night. It was the fourth place I'd checked, the previous three too expensive for my strained savings. $65 a night. I could manage that for a little while. Room 127 was a shrine to despair, thin walls, thinner carpets, and the pervasive smell of bleach and regret. I unpacked methodically, the engineer in me needing order in the chaos. My funeral suit went into the narrow closet. The rental agreement documents lay on the small, scarred table, the paper version of my ruin. And then I found it, tucked behind a photo in my wallet, Leonard Vance's business card. My hand shook only slightly as I picked up the motel's clunky, corded phone. He answered on the third ring. Vance and Associates, Leonard Vance speaking. Leonard, this is Alastair Croft. I need legal consultation. Alastair, his tone shifted instantly from professional to personal. My deepest condolences. Dennis was an extraordinary man. What happened? I told him, the eviction, the rental agreement, Vera's chilling timing. Leonard listened, a silent, attentive presence on the other end of the line. Is this legal? I finally asked, the weight of the day crushing down on me. Can she really do this? If the rental agreement is valid, she has the legal right to terminate a month-to-month tenancy upon the landlord's death, he said, his voice careful. Illinois law is quite clear. However, he paused, and I could hear the rustle of papers. There are other matters we need to discuss. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning? What kind of matters? Dennis's will reading. There are provisions you should know about. Provisions, the word hung in the air, charged with possibility. I can't discuss details over the phone, he continued, but Dennis was exceptionally thorough in his planning, very thoughtful about the people he cared about. Bring the rental documents, I'll need to see them. We scheduled the appointment. After I hung up, I sat on the edge of the hard bed, staring at my ghostly reflection in the dark window. Dennis's final words echoed in my mind. Trust Leonard, he'll explain everything. I had thought he was offering me a life raft. Now, a terrifying, hopeful thought began to form. What if my son had built me a battleship? The drive to Leonard Vance's office the next morning felt like crossing into another world. I left the shabby motel parking lot and navigated toward Chicago's gleaming loop, where steel and glass towers clawed at a gray, overcast sky. My one good suit felt like a costume, a thin veneer of dignity over a core of desperation. Baxter and Associates occupied the 28th floor. The elevator ride was a silent, swift ascent into a realm of quiet money and power. The reception area was all muted tones, deep carpets, and original art. The view of Lake Michigan was staggering, a panorama that probably cost more per month than my entire annual pension. The receptionist, impeccably professional, greeted me with a soft smile. Mr. Croft, Mr. Vance is expecting you, conference room B. Leonard rose as I entered. He was a man in his mid-50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a handshake that was both firm and reassuring. Alastair, thank you for coming. Please sit. I took a leather chair that felt like it could swallow me whole. Leonard, I need to understand my situation. Vera has made it very clear she considers me a problem to be solved. He steepled his fingers, his gaze steady. Dennis left a very detailed will. There will be surprises. Surprises, the word felt dangerous. Vera says everything belongs to her as the surviving spouse. Dennis anticipated various scenarios, Leonard said, a faint, knowing smile touching his lips. Trust the process, Alastair. Your son was extraordinarily thorough. I slid the rental agreement across the polished table. And this, can she really evict me based on this? Leonard examined the document, his expression unreadable. The agreement appears legitimate. However, inheritance law is complex. There are protections for family members that can, in certain circumstances, supersede simple landlord-tenant relationships. He looked up, his eyes locking with mine. Stay at the motel for now. Everything will become clear very soon. I have scheduled the formal will reading for this Friday at 2 o'clock. All parties will be present. The relief was tempered by a fresh wave of anxiety. All parties, you, Vera, and the witnesses Dennis specified, Tom Riley from the company, Martha Ellis as a family friend. He made a note on a legal pad. It will be recorded for legal purposes. Leonard, I began, the shame hot in my throat. I need to ask about your fees. My resources are limited. A genuine smile broke through his professional demeanor. Alastair, Dennis arranged for all legal expenses related to his estate to be paid from a dedicated fund. You don't need to worry about costs. Your son thought of everything. He paused, letting the weight of that statement settle. Absolutely everything. The next 3 days in the motel were a special kind of purgatory. I existed in a state of suspended animation, trapped between grief and a gnawing curiosity about what everything truly meant. The hum of the highway was a constant reminder of a world moving on without me, without Dennis. Finally, Friday arrived. I put on the same navy suit, my armor against the coming battle. The drive downtown felt like a march to judgment. Conference Room A was larger, grander, with a breathtaking view of the city. Leonard was already there, surrounded by stacks of documents and recording equipment. He looked like a general preparing his battlefield. Vera arrived last. She swept in, a vision in an impeccably tailored black dress, her expression one of poised, certain victory. Behind her trailed a sharp-faced woman with a predatory gaze and a briefcase that screamed expensive litigation. Margaret Walsh, she introduced herself with a crisp handshake. I'm representing Mrs. Croft's interests. Vera took a seat directly opposite me, her smile a tiny, cruel slash of red. Alastair, she said, her voice dripping with false pity. Why did you even come? There's nothing here for you. The words, meant to wound, bounced off the newfound resolve Dennis's secret planning had given me. I'm here by legal right, as Dennis's father. Legal right to what? She scoffed, loud enough for everyone to hear. You were a tenant. That arrangement ended. Please, Leonard's voice cut through the tension, calm but absolute. Let's proceed with proper formality. He activated the recorder. This is the formal reading of the last will and testament of Dennis Michael Croft, dated December 15th. The room fell silent. Vera leaned forward slightly, a predator scenting its prey. I gripped the arms of my chair. Leonard read through the preliminary legalese. Then he reached the substance. Now we come to the specific bequests. To my beloved wife, Vera Croft, I leave the following assets. The family residence at 1247 Maple Grove Drive, Evanston, including all furnishings and personal property contained therein. All vehicles currently registered in my name. The checking and savings accounts at First National Bank of Chicago, totaling approximately $340,000. Vera's smile bloomed, wide and triumphant. She leaned back, casting a victorious glance my way. See, Alastair, I told you, you get nothing. Margaret Walsh nodded, making a note. It was all going according to their script. Leonard continued, unperturbed. Additionally, Mrs. Croft receives all jewelry, artwork, and collectibles purchased during our marriage, valued at approximately $85,000. Leonard, Vera said with saccharine sweetness, I think we've covered everything important. Alastair can see that Dennis was very clear about his intentions. Actually, Leonard replied, his voice dropping into a lower, more deliberate register, we've only covered the preliminary distributions. There are additional bequests. He turned the page. The sound was deafening in the quiet room. To my father, Alastair Croft, who sacrificed 18 months of his retirement to care for me during my illness, I leave 50% ownership of Croft Dynamics, including all shares, voting rights, and dividend distributions. This represents approximately $35 million in current market valuation. The silence that followed was profound, a vacuum sucking all sound and air from the room. Vera's face went from triumph to utter, bloodless shock. What? The word was a strangled gasp. That's impossible. I'm his wife. Everything should belong to me. Leonard read on, as if she were a faint, distant noise. Additionally, Mr. Alastair Croft receives the workshop and all tools constructed for his use to be relocated to a property of his choosing. all model aircraft collections we built together during my childhood, and the sum of $150,000 from the Memorial Education Fund. I couldn't breathe. 50% of the company, $35 million, the workshop. It was a tidal wave of security, of vindication, of a son's profound love. After a week of homelessness and despair, he had given me back my world. This is fraud. Vera shot to her feet, her composure shattered. I'll challenge this. You orchestrated this, you scheming old man. Vera, I managed, my voice steady with a strength I didn't know I possessed. This is legal. Dennis had the right to distribute his assets as he saw fit. Legal? Her laugh was hysterical. You think I'll let you steal half of what belongs to me? Margaret, tell them this is contestable. Margaret Walsh was frantically reviewing her notes, her confidence visibly shaken. There may be grounds for undue influence, but nothing, Vera shrieked, her voice rising to a scream. Dennis was sick, dying, his judgment was compromised. This old man took advantage. Tom Riley finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. Vera, I was there. Until the very end, his mind was sharper than yours or mine. He knew exactly what he was doing. You're all conspirators, she whirled on Leonard. How much did he pay you to write this fiction? Leonard's calm was monumental. Mrs. Croft, I understand your disappointment, but these distributions were entirely Dennis's decision. He spent considerable time ensuring every detail was legally sound. Vera turned her fury back on me, her eyes blazing. You think you've won? I'll take everything from you, every penny, every share. By the time my lawyers are done, you'll die in that motel. Martha Ellis reached across the table and squeezed my hand. He loved you so much, Alastair, she whispered. But Leonard was organizing another document, his movements precise, final. Mrs. Grant, he said, his voice cutting through her tirade, please sit down, we haven't completed the reading. What else could there possibly be? Vera remained standing, her entire body trembling with rage. Leonard's smile was slight, but it reached his eyes. It was the smile of a man about to play his winning card. There is one more condition, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, a special clause that affects all previous distributions. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. The air grew thick, heavy, with impending revelation. The condition states, Leonard read, each word a hammer strike, that if my wife Vera attempts to force my father Alastair to leave our family home within 1 year of my death, the entire inheritance, including the house, vehicles, bank accounts, and all business shares, automatically transfers in full to Alastair Croft. The world stopped. Vera made a sound, a small choked gurgle of pure undiluted horror. Her hand flew to her throat. No, she breathed. This is a trap. Dennis also left a video recording explaining his motives, Leonard continued, setting up a small monitor. He wanted you to understand his reasoning. The screen flickered to life, and there he was, my son, thinner, his face drawn from the battle he'd lost, but his eyes, those brilliant, determined eyes, were clear and focused. Vera, his recorded voice filled the stunned room, gentle but unyielding. If you're watching this, it means you've evicted my father from our home. He sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. I hoped you would surprise me. I hoped the woman I married would show compassion in her grief, but I knew you too well. Vera was hyperventilating now, her chest heaving. Dad, Dennis said, looking directly into the camera, into my soul, I'm sorry you had to experience her cruelty, but I've protected you. Everything I built, everything I earned, it's yours now. Use it well, live comfortably, build something in that workshop. The video paused. Leonard's voice was quiet but absolute. The eviction occurred on March 15th, the day of the funeral. The condition was triggered immediately. All assets are transferred to Alastair Croft, effective now. The finality of it was staggering. It wasn't just a victory, it was an annihilation, a checkmate planned from beyond the grave. This isn't legal, Vera screamed, her voice cracking. A will can't have conditions like this. Actually, it can, Leonard replied, the epitome of calm. Conditional inheritance is perfectly legal in Illinois when the conditions are clear and not against public policy. Dennis consulted multiple experts to ensure its enforceability. Margaret Walsh tried to interject. "We'll challenge." "The video continues," Leonard interrupted, restarting the recording. Dennis's face reappeared, filled with a deep sadness. "Vera, I loved you for 7 years. I gave you everything I could, but love without kindness is just possession. Dad raised me to treat people with dignity, especially family. I hoped marriage would teach you the same." He paused, letting the words sink in. "If you had shown Dad even basic respect after my death, you would have inherited everything as my wife. But I knew your nature. I gambled that your greed would overcome your wisdom." A faint, sorrowful smile. "I lost that bet, but Dad won his future." The screen went black. Vera's breath hitched. Her eyes rolled back in her head. She swayed for a moment, then slumped forward, collapsing in a dead faint onto the polished conference table. Chaos erupted. Margaret Walsh shouted for help. Tom rushed around the table. Leonard calmly called for a medic. I sat utterly motionless, watching the scene unfold as if from a great distance. The roar of victory, of justice, was deafeningly silent inside me. It was replaced by something deeper, more profound, the overwhelming, humbling knowledge of my son's love. He had seen the monster hiding behind the beautiful mask, and with the precision of the master engineer he had built a perfect, inescapable cage for it. As paramedics attended to Vera, as Margaret Walsh gathered her things in stunned defeat, Leonard placed a hand on my shoulder. "He was extraordinary, Alastair," he said softly. "In 30 years of law, I've never seen a more perfectly executed estate plan. He didn't just leave you money, he left you justice." I finally looked away from the empty screen, my vision blurring with tears that were not of grief, but of awe. Dennis had finished his final project. He had protected me. He had, as always, kept his promise. The game was over, and my son, my brilliant boy, had won. Dennis's revenge was not born of hatred, but of love and brilliant foresight. He didn't just leave an inheritance, he engineered justice. If you were in Alastair's shoes, what is the first thing you would do with your new future? Share your thoughts and this story with someone who needs to see that good planning can outlast even the deepest betrayal.